Okay, we're gonna get started again. If people can take their seats.
Announce that.
Sure. Oh no. Also, if Eric Gray is here, have your credit card. Ah ha ha! Nice and heavy. Okay, everyone. We're gonna get started. So, I wanted to introduce Emily Lusick, who is a environmental scientist at CalRecycle, who's going to be moderating the second panel. Right.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Our first speaker is Marcus Gomez, a Sacramento native. He's proud to be a small business owner. Since 1997, California Clothing Recyclers has not only provided for his family, but also has created a key fundraising tool for numerous schools and nonprofits in the region. Each year, CCR recycles more than 3.5 million pounds of clothing with collection routes in Northern California. Marcus brokers and ships clothes to Central America, South America, and the Middle East. Our second speaker today is Alice Kohler, who leads Zero Waste's marketing department, interfacing with both municipalities and corporations to create and execute winning waste reduction initiatives. She has extensive and varied marketing experience, building such iconic brands as Adidas, Oscar Mayer, Playtex, and Butterball. Waste Zero is the leading waste reduction company in the United States. In business for over 30 years, Waste Zero has averaged a 44% reduction in solid waste for its over 400 partner communities, resulting in a positive financial impact of $1.7 billion and a 15.6 million ton reduction in greenhouse gases by implementing a number of different programs, including curbside textile and plastics recycling and a bag-based pay-as-you-throw. Our last panel speaker is Savia Granger, and she is currently the program and project strategist for Textile Exchange and the interim executive director for Fashion Positive. She has served on various international working groups such as the Sustainable Textiles Coalition and the Responsible Wool, Down, and Leather working groups. She currently leads several roundtable groups for Textile Exchange, including the Home and Hospitality Roundtable, which focuses on sustainable solutions for that sector. All right, Marcus, if you're ready.
Thank you for having me. Right there? There you go. Again, my name's Marcus Gomez. My company's California Clothing Recyclers. A little bit about myself. I am actually third generation in this business. My great uncle started back in the 50s, and he actually did cardboard, paper, rags, ticking, which back then they had from the mattresses, they used to recycle that. So I always tell people he was green before green was even popular, you know. My dad started with him in the early 60s and broke off and started his own company in 1964. But I'll get into that because my father's company was more about processing the material. What we do, we don't process the material. We work with thrift stores, you know, and mostly the thrift stores we work with are the smaller independent thrift stores. You know, your Goodwills, your Salvation Armies, some of those thrifts, they have the capacity to do what I do. They can bring it in, bale it, and then ship it themselves. People don't realize once you donate your clothing, it has a second life after the thrift store. And so that's what we do is we bring it into our warehouse, we bale it, and then we export it out. It's cheaper for them to process the clothing in their country than it is in this country. The processing part of the clothing has gotten more expensive here, you know, between insurances, fuel, your overhead, it just mushrooms. So what we also, the other way we get our clothing is we do fundraisers. You know, we work with churches, schools, nonprofits. We do clothing and shoe drives. In fact, Julie Brown, can you stand up, Julie? She coordinates a lot of the clothing and shoe drives for us. And so there's two components. We have what we call mixed rag or mixed clothing, and that comes from the thrift stores. It has already been gone through, and people They, they've already sold off all the good clothing. So, we don't get as much money for that as we do for what we call the credential clothing. And the credential clothing is straight donations. That's where we comes from the fundraisers. And we give more for that because there's shoes, purses, belts, stuffed animals, the clothing, and it hasn't been touched by the thrift stores, so you get more money for it. And that's what it's gotten really popular in the last few years, and that's what more people from other countries are looking for. They want the #1 clothing, the good clothing. So that's what we do. So we sell the mixed rag, the credential, and then we also do shoes. We sort and grade shoes. We get those mostly from the thrift stores. We bring them in, we pair them up, and if they're wearable, they still have life, then we bag them up and then we sell them. We ship shoes, we generally ship about 28,000 to 30,000 pounds at a time. Clothing, we can ship 88,000 pounds, which is 2 containers at a time a week. So, and it depends on the economy, a lot of different things. The weather affects us, starts raining. If it rains too long, people aren't donating. So we're constantly looking at the weather, the economy, and those affect everything we do, okay? So that's my business. Now, and you're talking about recycling, and that's what my dad did. We processed the clothing. We would go pick it up from the thrift stores, we would bring it in, and then we had sorters and we had graders. The sorters would sort out all the individual items. Men's shirts, men's cotton pants, men's poly pants, ladies' dresses, ladies' cotton dresses, ladies' skirts, wool, denim. It just went on down the line. It's just a whole process. And then what we had graders. And we would grade all those individual items into 1, 2, and a 3 grade. And then if it wasn't wearable and it was cotton, then we cut them into rags, wiping rags. And believe it or not, the federal government is probably the biggest buyer of rags. They use them in the military bases for maintenance, that sort of thing. So it was a process. We had 40,000 square feet of warehouse. We had 50 people working for us. So you can see how trying to do that here in California especially is a lot tougher than it is. Because everything we sell, it's all pennies on the pound. It's not, we're not getting dollars or $2 or $3 a pound. We're getting 25, 30 cents a pound, 15 cents a pound, depending on what the market, because all the products are market driven, and it's not just here in California, but it's throughout the United States. People don't realize how big an industry this is, but it's a pretty big industry. If you think, like she says, we do 3 to 4 million pounds a year, you can only imagine what the Goodwills do and the Salvation Armies do. They do tens of millions of pounds a year. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I don't have slides. I'm not the techiest person, which I probably shouldn't say in this part of the country, so sorry. But my name's Alice Kaler, and I'm here with Waste Zero. So Waste Zero, our corporate mission is to cut the trash in half across America. And we do that through implementing municipal recycling and waste reduction programs. Probably the one that we're most known for and is most common that we do is a bag-based pay-as-you-throw program. What that means, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think pretty relevant to the people in this room, because if you're sitting in here, then you care about this stuff. Every household pays utilities. And if you want to save money on water, if you want to save money on electricity, you use less water, you use less electricity. With trash, if you try to throw away less trash, your trash bill doesn't change. And what our programs do is enable people to actually save money by being more conscious about the amount of trash that they're generating and the amount of trash they're throwing away. And what we find when we implement these programs is that it reduces trash on average by 44% in a given community, which is really impressive. You know, I mean, I know Californians think of themselves largely as environmentalists, but if you look at the trash per capita of our communities, especially in Massachusetts, people are throwing away around 350 pounds per person of trash a year. Average in California is between 500 and 600. So it shows that when you implement these programs, you really can have a massive difference. I'd love to chat with any of you guys about those if you're interested in hearing more about that. But I'm here to talk about textiles. And why my company got involved in that is we looked at the waste characterization studies and saw that, you know, on average, somewhere between 4 and 8% of all landfill waste nationwide is textile waste. And that is extraordinarily painful because textiles are one of the few things in the landfill that retain latent value when they're thrown away. So I know one of the things I was asked to talk about are some of the challenges we face with collection. So we are not collectors ourselves. We work with other people who collect and help make their jobs and lives easier. And one of the big challenges that the collectors have seen, so one of our biggest partners does curbside textile collection. We are partnering with them to do sales and marketing and are in about 1.5 million households nationwide offering that service. The way that service works is if a community is participating, residents are sent bags and they can fill those bags, and then those bags are picked up with their weekly recycling. So it makes it really easy for consumers to do. But one of the challenges that we face, a couple of things with collection in major metropolitan areas, theft and looting of those textiles can be a bit of a challenge. And so we are really smart about when we're in metropolitan areas how we collect. So you imagine, you know, similar to what Californians see with bottles in their recycling. You know, you put out your bin, and then people, you know, go through to get the bottles, and it can cause kind of a mess. So you'd imagine something similar would happen with textiles. One of the other challenges that faces folks who collect textiles is when people have those big central drop-off bins, like the image showed, that can cause a lot of contamination. And what we learned in the introductory session this morning was that as soon as a textile is contaminated, exposed to trash, it becomes worthless. So one thing that we really advocate for strongly is source separation. Our preferred method for that is bag-based. So having people put things in bags and plastic bags helps reduce contamination of those goods and helps them retain their value. So we actually make bags out of recycled content, and then we take the bags back and regrind them into new bags to be used down the road, so helping with our footprint there. In addition, one of the other big challenges that we face, and probably the single biggest challenge we face is, and it was brought up in the last session, how do you make people care? Like, how do you make people want to do this? You know, we're all in here because we care. We're all in here because we're looking for solutions, but most people have a lot of other things on their mind besides recycling textiles. And there are 3 main ways that our group looks to do this, 3 main levers. The first is guilt people into doing it. So really make people realize that there is an impact to what they're doing, and through communicating the impact of their purchases and what they're doing, you can get people to do that. That's probably our least preferred method because no one really likes to feel guilty, and a lot of times that doesn't inspire action. But the second way that we find is very effective is to make people feel good about what they're doing and make it have a positive impact to, for example, a nonprofit. So one of our big partners is Goodwill and Salvation Army. So we'll do programs with them where we will actually make bags that have their logo on them, and even in some cases a donation center address, to really motivate and inspire people to fill those bags and take them in. The third thing that we do is make it super, super, super easy. So the best way to get people to participate and recycle their textiles is to make it really easy for them, which is why curbside textile programs are probably our most effective way to do that. When people can put textiles out just with their weekly recycling, we find that they participate much higher. So in our given community, our participation rates are anywhere from 4 to 15 pounds per household. Per year, which is a pretty good level of participation, one that we look to increase every year, but something that we're pretty proud of. So again, you know, we help bring people together. The challenge that we face, and I'm sure you're seeing this too, as more of the fast fashion and more of the goods enter the market, the end market values are starting to decline. And so at the end of the day, you know, these companies that are trying to make a profit for recycling textiles are starting to struggle. Even some of the international markets with the recent tariffs that were put in place, China is now looking for other markets to take their goods, and so they're now countries that were taking secondhand American goods are now getting firsthand goods cheaper in the international market. So the competition is getting pretty stiff. So I covered a lot, but I'm happy to answer questions that you have once we get to that part. So thanks.
There's this little button here, hi, and I have a clicker here. Oh, am I doing that or are you doing it?
You will.
Okay. Sorry, new to this thing. Hi, my name is Savia Granger. I'm with Textile Exchange. I'm a program and project strategist, and one of the many things that I do is to lead several of our industry sector roundtables, one of which is the Home and Hospitality Roundtable that I'm going to tell you a bit about. I did want to quickly address one of the questions that came sort of over from this side earlier, was specifically what are some of the challenges that recycling facilities are facing here in California for textile recycling. And on our Aquafil tour this morning, it was really surprising to me that factory is kind of on hold until March simply because they can't get enough electricity from PG&E. Now, we all have our own opinions about PG&E these days, but to not, when our entire country is trying to create jobs with manufacturing, and here we are in Northern California and a factory can't get the energy, simply the electricity that they need to proceed with their manufacturing, to me, that's a big miss right there. Just wanted to bring that up in relation to that question. So on with my own presentation here. Let's see what happens when I push that button. My colleague Trini told us a bit earlier about the main mission for Textile Exchange and our standards, which is of course a very large component of our work. Another component of our work is convening industry sector stakeholders, could be brands, could be manufacturers, other nonprofit organizations, recyclers such as yourself across the entire industry to help create solutions. So obviously, the biggest solution that looms across all of us is climate change. So Textile Exchange as an organization recently went through a strategic review, and the number one thing that came out of that after hundreds of interviews with stakeholders and brands, the number one concern was climate. How can we as an industry positively affect our climate footprint? So our new strategic goal is to be the driving force for urgent climate action with a goal of 35 to 45% reduced CO2 emissions from textile, fiber, and material production by 2030, which is a steep goal, and we're going to need partners, and I'm going to tell you about some of those partners in a minute. So as you can see here, all the way on the left, Textile Exchange focuses on fiber production. Now, most people in this room are fairly familiar enough with textiles to know that it's not just about the fiber production, but there's actually many aspects to an end product, right? You have the fiber production, you have yarn production, then you make fabric out of that yarn, then you have dyeing and finishing, you have assembly, and that tiny little sliver down at the end is end use, what the customer actually does with the product. So this would be the whole life cycle of the creation of this product. And Textile Exchange really focuses on the fiber production, the initial part of that. I think another question earlier was about Textile Exchange's thoughts or role in fiber shedding, microplastics. And as you can see, our main focus is on fiber production. However, we do have a concern with what happens with the after shedding. But as you can see by this graph, it's just not part of the focus of our group. We're very aware of it, though, and we do convene partners to help create solutions for that, but it's not our main focus. So here you can see, when you take that full life cycle, and on the left again, we can see fiber production. We see all the various stages in between, but if we take that last stage with a bit of consumer awareness and with partners like to my right here, to your left, if we can then take some of those fibers and fabrics and various bits and pieces and pull them back into the supply chain via organizations like Fashion for Good, ICO, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and Fashion Positive. You can see all the various partner organizations that Textile Exchange works with, but those listed across the bottom are critical global partners in circularity, which is part of how we frame this. When you take the end use product and bring it back into the beginning of that life cycle. So you can see here some of the many partners that we work with can be the UN, Apparel Impact Institute, Sustainable Apparel Coalition. There are many partners that go towards this, and this is just a few of them, really. There are many in this industry. So I'm a big fan of this, is what we call the butterfly model. So on the right, you can see recycled material waste reduction, and those are more the plastics and chemical inputs and outputs. And on the left, you can see organic agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and biosynthetics, and that's a whole other wing of this industry and for circularity, what we're trying to do to implement change. But for the moment, we're gonna focus on the blue side here, which is really taking existing fabrics and pulling them back through the supply chain, as opposed to composting or as opposed to regenerative agriculture. I know we have some big players in that industry here in the room, which I'm happy to see. So back to home and hospitality. So one of the things that Textile Exchange is very good with is compiling data across industry sectors. And this is from last year's fiber material portfolio. This is from 2017 analysis data that we pulled in 2018. We are currently assessing all the information for 18 for this year, and we'll have that coming out soon, but this is the latest that we have from last year. So if you look at large apparel, medium apparel, outdoor and sports, and then at the very bottom, you'll see home textiles. And the large green line there is all cotton, right? So for home and hospitality textiles, we know that it is 78% cotton. And that's not usually blends. For home and hospitality, for the most part, if you have a cotton sheet, it's 100% cotton sheet. There are very few blended sheets, and there are some starting to come out, but for the most part, what comes out of a hotel laundry facility, their their sheeting is all cotton, which is really great for a recycling facility because they don't have to take out the buttons, the zippers, they don't have to take it apart. It's actually a large piece of all cotton that they can throw right into their recycling machine, and for the most part, it's usually all white. So here we have some really great low-hanging fruit, right? Towels are a pretty consistent size and weight. Sheeting, a pretty consistent size and weight. Very easy for a recycler to work with if they're actually mechanically recycling that fiber back into yarn. To go back to my earlier diagram, it's very easy for them to take it from the right and scoop it back to the left. So it's this bottom line, home textiles, that we're focusing on a new project. So the project that's in development currently, and we're expecting, we're pulling in partners like Marcus, like Alice from across the textile sector, and this is a new project that we're working on, and so we're not in the final stage yet, but it's kind of a perfect time to talk about the development of how a project like this can come about, right? Pretty much when we're talking about recycling, especially for cotton, all the dots are in place. We have the collectors, we have the concentrators, we have the yarn production. What we need to do is just tie all those little dots together, as you can see here. And that's pretty much a series of conversations, phone calls, commitments, setting up and developing business partnerships across these stakeholders. And that's one of the things that Textile Exchange excels in, is creating these partnerships and convening across supply chain to help bring some of these valued products like recycled cotton back into product. So as I mentioned before, sheeting and towels are consistent weights and fibers, and they can be very easily recycled once a collection system is implemented, and that's what we're currently working on, is setting up a collection system. And the longer term vision, let me go back a second. So one of the pieces of this is that we know that for hospitality industry, hotels, for the most part, they either do all their laundry in-house or they send it out to a laundry facility. Either way, wherever that point of collection and laundry is. Someone's making a decision. Does this sheet or tablecloth have a stain? Does it have a tear? Can I send it back to the hotel to be reused? Or is it now garbage? Is it now worth recycling because it either has a stain or a tear or whatever? Someone's making that decision. So whatever that textile product goes back into the recycling bin, that hotel or laundry facility, what we're trying to do is connect all the partners between the laundry facilities, the collectors, the sorters, the concentrators. That's the critical piece of the puzzle that we're working on right now. So once we can set up those collection areas with the hotels, because that real estate's already in place, those facilities for collection already exist, whether it's the laundry facility or the hotel itself. It's simply a matter of putting up a way to collect at that location. Once we have that collection system set up in place, we're also envisioning that that could also be a collection site for domestic recycling. Also, again, sheets and towels. We don't want to take away from Marcus's clothing business, but at the same time, we do know that conventional users of these products, domestic, there's also a place for this as well. So once we can set up the system across hotels and laundry facilities, we hope to then be able to expand it to consumers as well. So that's our project. That's what we're working on.
Thank you guys so much. We're going to open it to questions. Are there any online? Okay. Any questions?
This question is for Sevilla. I was just curious if you could elaborate on the geographic region of where this project is targeting.
So we have partners internationally that are at various stages of this project. We're not creating one project. What we're doing is helping to connect partners in various regions. Because I happen to live here in Northern California, I live in San Francisco and Potrero Hill. So one of the things that I'm very interested in is connecting with partners like not only up here, my fellow panelists, but also those of you out in the room. How can we set up California as a shining example of how this can work very easily? But we also have some pretty dedicated partners in Europe, in Spain and in Eastern Europe who already have their facilities set up in place, and they're literally making the phone calls and making these connections, because once the light bulb went off over people's head of how easy this could be, it's been like wildfire. Literally my email is like melting down from all the people getting in touch with us about this project. So to answer your question, it's not one project across the globe. It's simply setting up a methodology by which hopefully any geographic region could reproduce this, unique to their own challenges and their own systems that are set up. It's not a cookie cutter, obviously. It's going to be different for everyone, but the idea is consistently the same. Does that help?
If I could just jump in here for a second, I just wanted to let people online know that we are taking questions, and our email is auditorium@calepa.ca.gov. Thank you.
Hi, my question's for Alice. I just have a question about the curbside collection of the textiles. Are those bags then collected by the regular recycling truck or a separate vehicle?
So it depends on the program, but the majority of our programs, it's collected by a separate vehicle, because the way that a lot of the MRFs, where all of the stuff goes, the way that a lot of them are configured, when the bags come in the carts, they can't withstand what happens at that point. So we collect them in advance, and that also reduces the contamination that the goods have.
Thank you.
Kevin Miller, City of Napa, and Alice may be most interested in this, and it answers a little bit of her question. In our community, since 2013, we've had a separate program we call the Recycle More program, and we combine e-waste, large metal appliances, large scrap metal, and clothing and shoes, which we then sell to Goodwill, but in a separate appointment-based collection, because it's none of those are compatible with especially single stream collection systems and facilities. But our program has grown 600% since 2013. So, and part of the logic too was those were all positive return items. So there was enough revenue to allow it to be free of charge to our residents, to our customers. And that's a big breaking point too. Unfortunately, when people have to pay for a service, they don't participate as much. This allowed us to go overcome that barrier.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We see that as well. You know, if you make it free and you make it convenient, people will absolutely participate. And this is, you know, in the programs that we do, when we sign a municipality on, we actually pay the municipality by the ton for the material. So it's a completely free program. And that's, I think, what has been kind of the key to our success in getting folks to sign on.
Can I answer one of the things about the green bins that you see out there? I don't do that. I've been asked many times if I wanted to purchase green bins. I'm not a nonprofit. I'm a for-profit company, and a lot of those are nonprofits. And what I've found that a lot of the problems with those is that a lot of people dump a lot of junk on those, and then where they're posted, you know, you get a lot of junk, and some of the strip malls or whoever the owners, they don't like that. It's a problem for them, you know. So. That's what and that's why we do more of the fundraising direct with churches, schools, sports teams, anybody who wants to raise funds. That's what we do. So, but yeah, those are, and not to mention a lot of those companies, they have volunteers, so they're not paying people to go out and collect that stuff where I do. And for me, in order for make it profitable for me, it has to be I have to fill a truck up, you know. 100 pounds here, 300 pounds there. It's not that much compared to 5,000 or 6,000 pounds that you pick up. So, anyway.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I work for Athens Services down in Southern California. Two questions for Alice. Where you said that you have a separate vehicle that's collecting these materials. I understand that. Is it directly going to the MRF, or is it actually being dropped off in a different place so that it is not, you know, it's avoiding additional potential contamination? And the other thing is, though it's going to the nonprofit organizations, there's a lot of material that is not going to be used. So it's initial diversion, but it's not long-term diversion. So what is Waste Zero doing to ensure that those materials, and is there a place for those materials to go for recycling? Might be going to California clothing recyclers, but that's only one option. So where else is this material going?
Yeah, so thanks for your questions. Every program that we do is unique in that we partner with the folks who collect, or with cities, or with nonprofits. So depending on how they want to collect, that's kind of where the materials end up. But our materials are not picked up and taken to a MRF. Our materials are generally picked up and taken to a hub where all the other materials go to, and then they're baled and sent out to the reuse markets. So those global reuse markets are used kind of across the board for a lot of different manufacturers. And we, Waste Zero as a company, our goal is to pull them out of the landfill and to enable the folks who handle the recycling and reuse to get as much clean material as possible. So we aren't as involved in the back end. That's really more for the reuse and global markets. That said, our philosophy, and I think, you know, we can definitely debate this, because I think that there's a lot of discussion going on about this right now. Our philosophy is that the more you can source separate, and the more that you can combine like materials and get those materials into large quantities, the greater the likelihood is that those products will be recycled or reused or repurposed in some way. So that is our goal, and that is what we're trying to achieve with these programs. But we don't use the MRFs, and they all go to a hub.
Hi, my name is Marissa Adler from Resource Recycling Systems, and I have a few questions, if that's okay. I have two questions for Marcus. One of them is, how have you seen the used clothing industry change over the last 15 years in terms of quality and your ability to stay in business and make a profit? And how have the export markets shifted over that period of time? And then also on the sourcing side, the collections, how competitive is that for you? Do you kind of chase after material, donations, or do you have more than you can handle?
On the sourcing side, with the thrift stores, it is competitive. It's competitive in the sense that, I get people from down in Southern California or Fresno area coming up trying to take over some of, my customers. And I mostly deal with the smaller thrifts. I don't deal with the Goodwills or Salvation Armies, because like I said, they source their own. Because the thrifts that I deal with, they don't have that capacity. And we generally get it in garbage bags. They put it in garbage bags. They send my trucks out, and they pick it up. We bring it in, and we bale it. The other question was the market. It depends. The quality, it depends on the economy. Okay, when our economy is good, people are donating, and the quality is there. And believe it or not, the price actually comes down. When the prices per pound go up is when we're in a recession and there's not that much on the market. So the quality is not there, but the prices are higher. It's funny that way. Another part of your question was?
I think that was pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And if I can ask just one more question, if that's okay. On the collection side, maybe this is for Alice, I'm not sure, or maybe Sevilla also. What factors have you seen are the biggest determinants in cost effectiveness for a curbside collection program?
I mean, it's all about participation. The more people who are participating, the better ROI we get on our programs. So one of the reasons that we got involved was because a lot of our communities that participate in programs like Pay As You Throw Trash, where people are charged for every single thing that they put in the trash, they're much more willing and open to learn about ways that they can recycle things. And so their participation level is significantly higher. But really, when we'll go into a market with one of our partners and the participation level just isn't there and the programs aren't sustainable. But yeah, that is number one, because it costs money, obviously, to send the bags. It costs money to communicate with the people. It costs money to operate the trucks. And if the trucks are only picking up 5 bags and you've got a truck riding a whole recycling route, that's a lot of money. So yeah, that's number one.
I would absolutely agree that consumer education is the number one challenge for anybody in this room. Whatever aspect of recycling you're dealing with is all about, it comes so much down to consumer education, because 2 aspects, right? It's not only how they dispose of it, the challenges that Alice and Marcus deal with, but also with Textile Exchange, we help companies to explore better business models so that they are not so reliant on the churn and burn of our resources. Better business models mean responsible growth, not just stratospheric growth. And this is a topic that not a lot of business people want to hear this. CEOs don't like to hear negative year-over-year growth. But there are companies out there that are really investing in better business models where they assure their shareholders that they're investing in responsible growth, not high dollar growth. And this is exactly the kind of thing we need. We also need consumers to be aware that instead of buying this fast fashion, people blame the fashion industry. It's not the fashion industry's fault. Fast fashion wouldn't exist if people didn't buy it. So we as a community need to be very realistic about why fast fashion exists. H&M wouldn't exist if people didn't buy $5 dresses. Neither would Old Navy, my old alma mater. It wouldn't happen. So if people actually valued what they wore, invested in better clothing, took care of it. I mean, I grew up sewing and mending things. That's part of how I got into this industry, was learning how to sew and fix things and clean stains. If that's another aspect of consumer education, is just literally knowing how to take care of what you've got, how to recognize quality versus cheap. A $5 t-shirt is probably not going to last you as long as a $10 one. People don't want to pay the extra money. Well, we need to help them understand why that's actually a better choice in the long run, and how to take care of that more expensive t-shirt so that they feel they got the wear for wear value out of it.
And just one other thing I'd add that I think is super fascinating, and something I didn't realize until about a week ago. The challenge in education and recycling, boomers get it, because a lot of them grew up in the 70s when recycling really caught on, and it is in their DNA. And Gen Z gets it too, and there's a lot of kind of cachet to being more environmentally conscious and responsible. It's like people like me, it's Gen X that are the real group that needs to be educated and needs to start to care. So you look at Gen X and older millennials, and that's where the biggest gap is in terms of participation in recycling and education. So just kind of an interesting thing to think about as we think about, where to invest money, time, and resources in education.
Hi. So one of the things, I have a lot of things to say, but one of the things I wanted to say is 1.7 billion tons of goods were exported last year. There's very little transparency around where that stuff is going and what's happening to it. And I would suggest that there's not a lot of real value add to those countries and where they're going. So one of the things I want to say is that this idea that you're talking about has a potential of growing a market within our own, country. But one of the things I don't want us to forget is that there's an opportunity to do this collection process and to funnel it through the market in such a way that it is hitting the reuse sectors first, and then as it goes further down that funnel, through this collection process, is going back into the circular economy in ways where the things are broken down. So I think the Cal EPA has a huge opportunity here to provide some of the guidance and the infrastructure and the money, frankly, that could help facilitate these collection and funneling processes of a reuse and then recycling industry. And we could bring money into the local economies in supporting businesses that are frankly brutal to run. Marcus, as you know, brutal. And we could create a market that makes sense in California, frankly, and creates jobs and creates opportunities for a lot of different sectors of this sector.
Can I answer? You mentioned creating jobs in our industry. Like I said, it's getting tough. My father employed 50 people. His company no longer exists. I don't think he could exist today, doing what he did. I've got a customer in LA who at one point employed 100 people, and his thing is that he's trying to sell his building. As soon as he's down to a skeleton crew, as soon as he sells his building, he's moving to Texas. So it's getting tougher to operate a business here in California, no less than the United States. And that's why what I do is I'm the middleman and I'm sending it over. It's like I said, it's cheaper for them to process it in their country and sell it in their country. So.
Hi, I'm Jana Mulder. So I have a background as a model and then a small background as a fashion buyer for a company that was definitely not sustainable. And now I'm a student and going to school for this specifically, like sustainability and fashion. I love it so much. And thank you so much, CalRecycle, for putting this on, because it's been almost 2.5 hours and so enlightening. And thank you for everyone participating too. So you talked a little bit on consumer education, and I wonder what individually are you doing to grow awareness?
So I'll take it first. So one of the biggest things we're doing is we are, when we launch in a city or in a community, we put together a mailer program and we send them bags to put the goods in, and the bags are printed with what can go in them. People inherently run through a cycle of clothes that they use. I think there obviously is a higher order question that we talked about of not getting people to maybe use as much in the first place. But what we're really focused on is once the goods are in the house, how they can move them out and what goods actually have value. So we do those mailing programs to really get the bags in their hands and get them ready to throw things away in a responsible way. But we also do things like social media programs where we educate consumers on the fact that their textiles do still have latent value. The problem is that, these statistics are terrifying and these statistics are horrible but they don't seem to drive action. And so what we've found is by physically putting something in their hand that they can go fill their closet out of their closet and get rid of it without having to do anything or drive anywhere or exert any energy is the most effective way that we have to get people to participate. We are all absolutely bombarded with statistics, and we are all guilted and shamed constantly into everything that we buy and do. And I know that sounds terrible, but it's kind of true. And so it's really, people will freeze and they'll get amygdala hijacked and not participate. And so we give them little things to drive them into action to get them to do small steps. And then that will maybe lead to the next step. And then maybe they won't buy that thing in the first place. But right now, what we're trying to do is that.
That's great on a community level. And we need that kind of model massed out across the whole globe. One thing I would like to add to that, I think probably most everyone in this room remembers the turtle with the straw in their nose. And that was a major watershed moment, not only for drinking straws, but I think in general for disposable plastics. Nobody in this industry wants another turtle with a straw in their nose for our industry. Nobody wants that. But the thing is, something like that is going to happen. Customers are going to turn either against us or they're going to start figuring it out. Nobody wants to have to create that. We don't want to create a tail wags the dog thing, but it's almost like it will take that level of disgust for people to get it. Now, Rana Plaza created that for labor issues. I'm sure everybody in this room knows what I'm talking about with Rana Plaza, and that was a major watershed moment for the textile industry for labor issues. What's it going to be for environmentalism? We don't want a disaster. We don't want to hurt animals. Nobody does. But what's it going to take for humans to viscerally get the damage we're doing? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that if we can create or find that answer, and I don't want it to be destructive and ugly, but that's what we need to get people to really have the light bulb go off.
Hi, thank you for this whole discussion. I'm Hiroko from InnoFabrics, and I feel that we can bring the sorting and grading back to the United States, especially if we start incorporating some technology that's being used and developed in Europe right now. So I'm committed to doing that. To just, I guess, turtle shell back off your point there. I think you mentioned that Textile Exchange is a voluntary driven membership-based activator, right? And so I think that until either California or some other way of looking at what the cost, like the actual true cost of the externalities around environmental impact of this industry by the polluters here, even in California today who are producing, I think it needs to be a combined effort. So I'm not sure if CalRecycle is involved in that or not in any way, or could be with the EPA to look at what the true costs are for production. And then there was another point that we were talking about around the Waste Zero program. We've had programs here that I remember with ICO and H&M and that type of initiative, and the incentive is usually get 15% off your next purchase. I don't know if that's a great incentive. And where are we in California in municipal waste collection? I know LA tried it, but so those are my comments and question.
Yeah, perfect thing to talk about in the World Cafe. But I was going to say, as to, does Cal EPA work amongst maybe the different departments in that for true cost of some of these production processes? Not that I know of. Again, this is the kind of things we really like to hear about, though, if that's something that we want to look into doing. And as to I forgot your second point already, sorry. Specifically about textiles? Not, jurisdictional level, there's nothing on the state level, mandating that has to happen. I think there are very few jurisdictions that allow it in their recycling bin, and even fewer that do some kind of separate textile collection. I didn't even know about Napa, and I believe there's one in San Francisco. Nope. And LA tried it. So, so there's not a whole lot going on. That's why I wanted to start this conversation, because it's kind of like.
But there are a lot of models around the world. It's amazing if you look at what has happening in Asia and in Europe and the amount of individual responsibility they're making people take for what they throw away. There are a lot of models out there, and legislation, to your point, is absolutely the key. If people aren't incentivized or disincentivized, it's hard to get them off of autopilot in terms of their behavior.
I'll add to that just because we don't have the perfect solution today doesn't mean we can't try. And what's the old saying, don't let good be the enemy of great, right? So I've been in the sustainability conversation for 15 years now as a professional, but my whole life as an environmentalist and as a hippie, right? I'll admit. So also my undergraduate education was in textile design, and I went to North Carolina State University, founded by Buckminster Fuller, who's a famous systematic thinker, right? He kind of invented this whole systems thinking of design, right? So there's also an old saying in design, fail early, fail often, right? So just because we don't have it right today, we have to keep trying. Try what we can today, learn from those successes and failures, reinvent it as the next thing that will be better. This conversation has evolved so much in the last 15 years. It is astonishing when you look back at where we started. Just in my experience in the industry, it is really amazing. So where we will be 15 years from now will be exponentially better. So even though right now at this nexus is challenges, when we all put our minds together and collectively create these solutions, which is exactly what Textile Exchange does, is convenes concerned parties exactly like who are in this room to create these solutions on an ongoing conversational basis, that's where we will evolve. So let's not get discouraged if we're not there yet. Let's all just stay committed and stay in the conversation.
Thank you so much to our panelists. We're actually out of time, so we're going to take a 1-hour break for lunch, and then we'll have our third panel, and that was the perfect lead-in for our World Cafe. So hopefully people can stay and have that collaboration, and maybe we can come up with some of those ideas as well.
Yeah, just a quick comment. So we hope you enjoyed the morning session, and we're now, as Emily said, we're breaking for lunch, and we're hoping that you guys can continue the conversation. We have some friendly folks in the room if you want to mingle with them. We have some amazing ladies from Fibershed, Rebecca and Heather, if you want to wave. And then Heidi and Joanne. Joanne's going to be our one of our keynote speakers later this afternoon from California Product Stewardship Council, and then Californians Against Waste, Robert and Bonnie. So, hopefully like you guys make friends and just connect. So see you guys at 1:30.
So I live in Fort Lauderdale. Really?
I'm from Asheville.
Oh, nice.
I was literally just there for Thanksgiving. I literally flew in last night.
You didn't get caught in the snow, did you?
No, thank goodness. I didn't, but my flight was delayed because of some other shenanigans, airport shenanigans. So I literally got in at 1:30 last night and got 2 hours sleep. Got up.
Oh my gosh.
Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm with Regions Apparel, and I just want to thank you for speaking and for validating what I'm working on.
Yeah.
To be honest, Chris and I kind of should connect. Yeah, I love to. I live in San Mateo.
Yeah.
My problem is
have
I
a
have
similar use to markets. Like we basically 20% just have to connection. Yeah, we're together. It's a very similar back end, shredded for insulation, generally. Yeah. Yeah. So we only about 3% of everything is designated a certain way. But that's all. And that'll be like just but everything else is yeah. Yeah, well, our biggest partner is actually a huge owner of thrift shops. And so this is their primary way of getting material. Thank you so much. About 20%. Thank you.